Our next presentation will be delivered by Andrew Swan, who is the Chief Scientist at AGBU. Andrew has been involved in breeding research for more than 30 years and is very closely involved in the delivery of sheep genetics evaluations, as we just saw with Steve calling out the team. Andrew will be discussing the very much anticipated developments in indexes, including how breeding objectives have evolved from being production focused to including sustainability and social considerations. He will be talking about what this has meant in terms of the developments to the way indexes are modelled. Thanks, Swanee.
Thank you, Emma, and sorry I changed my title a bit, but thought it fit with the conference quite nicely. And good afternoon, everybody. At the outset, I just want to acknowledge the help that the work that I've done jointly here with Sam Walkham, who's also from AGBU, and will be presenting later on in the conference too. Okay, so just thought I'd start with my conclusion slide actually. We've already, this is basically a summary of what I'm going to go through. First point there, obviously the last few years have shown us how challenging agriculture can be, and that's only likely to be to continue into the future, and we need to think more about sustainable sheep production. So leading on from that, the indexes that we've got at the moment for merinos and in many livestock industries have really focused on productivity. That's the output traits of the amount of wool, the amount of meat and so on that comes out of a system. So that's been a focus in the past. To meet the new challenges of developing sustainable production systems, we really need to think more about those sort of traits. Fortunately, as Peter went through really nicely, over the last few years we've actually developed the system more to deliver more sustainability traits. I'll go through a few of those a little bit later. But now the challenge is to bring those together into new indexes. Importantly, they need to be backed by industry consultation and improved bioeconomic modelling. So all that's going to lead into the introduction of research indexes at the moment for merinos coming up in 2023. Just a terminology refresher, you'll notice that I actually had the title Breeding Objectives for Merinos, and I just wanted to say that is where we start off. It's a breeding objective to improve profitability or sustainably in a commercial production system. And indexes are really the tool for how we achieve those breeding objectives. They're a tool which combines breeding values, and therefore the outcomes from using indexes is controlled by genetics, is determined by genetics to a large degree, but it's always towards a breeding objective. So the breeding objective development is what we've been focusing on. Back to indexes though. So the current merino indexes really are getting a bit long in the tooth, so they date back to 2014. So we have indexes, but they really target three different breeding objectives, if you like, or production systems. So we've got the fibre production, merino production and dual purpose indexes as standards for merinos. Within those breeding objectives there are two different indexes. There's a base cut price one and plus indexes which include more traits. So in a general sense, those three broad breeding objectives and the indexes within them cover pretty much the diversity of where you can shift merinos genetically, from wool quality down on the FP production end through wool production, reproduction and turning off lambs at the dual purpose end. So in a general sense, they cover a broad range of options, and really they've done a pretty good job over time. So this is how they have done for one of those indexes. This is a variant of the merino production index, and we can see the genetic trend in the overall index and also in the component traits. And what you can see there is that for a lot of the component traits, we've achieved really good genetic gains over time. as Steve said, indicated we could lift that, but we're still doing pretty well compared to our predictions. So fleece weight, weaning rate for reproduction, yearling weight, all going up. Body composition traits are all going up as well. This is across the whole database. Actually in a little bit higher than we would expect from if people were actually focusing on this index. So people might often say that the index is not the primary tool for selection, but in retrospect they do a really good job of benchmarking where we've come from over time. I said this was a variant of MPP, so it's actually a variant that some people use, which includes emphasis on breech wrinkle, and you can see that along with increased recording of breech wrinkle and breech cover that Peter mentioned, we're actually seeing reductions, favourable trends in the trait, which are pretty much in line with the expectation of this particular index. So it balances reductions in breech wrinkle with still maintaining increases in fleece weight. So that's partially a sustainability, that's got a bit of sustainability built into it, but of course sustainability means a lot more things, and as I said before, we've got a lot of different genetic tools these days to help us with the different aspects of sustainability. So importantly, as Steve said, we're delivering genomic breeding values which increase the accuracy across a range of traits, particularly hard to measure traits. Of course, the output traits that I mentioned before that have been the focus previously, they're still obviously going to be important. In addition, health and welfare traits, like our new reproduction analysis includes ewe rearing ability, so lamb survival. Lambing ease is due for an update in terminals this year to go genomic. Wrinkle, fleece rot, and we're also doing work on fly strike breeding values at the moment with AWI. And of course we've had WEC and DAG breeding values for a long time. On the carbon neutral side, Daniel Brown will talk tomorrow about new developments in methane and feed efficiency. The data collection that's going on there will lead to breeding values in the next couple of years. But in that regard, methane's one thing, but indirect means could also have an even bigger impact basically on the system. So for example, just being able to turn off lambs faster to market specs might have a big impact on methane output from systems. Steve told the really nice story already about IMF and shear force and eating quality, and of course down the bottom there we have making farms more resilient. We've already got breeding values for adult weight, and now with our new reproduction analysis coming out of that are also ewe condition score breeding values, and we want to include those in the indexes that we develop this year, that we're introducing this year. So we've gone through a process of industry consultation, which is really important for delivering new indexes, obviously. What we always find when we talk to people about developing new indexes is that they say that we really need to review them more often than the 10 years it's gone past since we've introduced the Merino Select indexes. So other analyses have seen indexes more recently, so really Merino Select is where the biggest, greatest demand for new indexes is coming from. When we're talking about standard indexes that are going to be reported across the whole database, they really need to be in line with the directions that the industry needs to go for, identified at a higher level. So looking at core principles like increased production, increasing the national flock through reproduction, improving welfare, and making farms more resilient. So the consultation process has taken place over a couple of years. First off, there was a survey back in 2021, which was really a general survey done by Gus Rose, who went around and interviewed a number of industry stakeholders. Since then, late last year, we've backed that up with a more detailed production system survey, an online survey that some of you may have done through sheep genetics to collect more of the quantitative data that we need to rework the indexes. Importantly, returning to the breeding objective idea, the importance of the breeding objective, people were asked to answer the questions with respect to their commercial target operations of their brand buying clients. So we got 53 respondents, not just ram breeders, but also commercial producers across all production environments. After we'd done the survey, we realised that we needed a bit more information, so we did a follow-up questionnaire to look at, to collect more information on culling practices, and we got 27 respondents from that. So some of the highlights of the survey: the average flock size going in that was approaching 4,000 breeding ewes. An interesting thing that came up was 30% of the respondents were saying that they were joining ewe lambs. So you might say that it's perhaps a little bit of a skewed survey of the people that responded there, but it seems like that's definitely a trend that we need to cater for within some of the breeding objectives that we developed this year. Along the same lines, 43% of people were joining to a non-merino sire, which was, and they were joining to terminal size to say 25% of the flock. Quite high weaning rates, pretty standard flock structure of 5 matings per ewe, and average mortality, as you can see there. One of the things we put in the survey was just questions to ask people how they rated the importance of changing particular traits. So anywhere from not important at all through low, moderate to high. The ones that really stood out most, I suppose, were that people were placing a high level importance, moderate to high level importance on both increasing fleece weight and reducing breech wrinkle. So fleece weight's obviously a key trait in all our indexes at the moment, and it's pretty obvious that breech wrinkle needs to come in as well. But if we dig down into some of the other traits, if we, what Sam's done here is he's taken the respondents who identified reducing fibre diameter as highly important and compared them to the rest. And what you can see here is that of the other traits, they were also valuing these high rainfall resilience traits, things like dag, fleece rot, and fly striker. If we look at people who thought that improving carcass composition, muscle fat and condition score was important, they were also really interested in high growth rates, early growth rates, bit of interest on eating quality and reproduction. So that's more towards a dual purpose type of enterprise. Reducing worm egg count, when that's important, people are also saying that breech wrinkle was important, muscle and fat, repro, and again the high rainfall resilience traits. So putting all that together, we could start to see where breeding objectives were starting to segment, and really the biggest difference here is along this axis. So from people who are really heavily into producing turning off lambs out of merinos, through to people who are more focused on high quality wool. There's another axis going through there, low to high rainfall, and so we came up with these 4 broad objectives. So wool production and maternal lamb production, and then these sustainable merino enterprises at the end here with a high rainfall version. So that's not really too different, I don't think, to our current objectives. It's putting it slightly differently, but what's becoming more important, what we're adding here is traits like resilience down here, so body condition score to get you through hard times. Wrinkle is coming through, worm egg count and that sort of thing. So still the normal productivity traits are important, but we're seeing those other ones as well. Just on some of the specific data, looking at the most diverse groupings of wool production and the maternal lamb side of it. More people saying they were joining ewe lambs in the maternal objective grouping, but still a few coming through there in the wool production side. Winning rate's quite similar, a little bit higher on the maternal side. Turning off merino lambs a little bit early, a little bit heavier, more joining to terminal size. Selling the crossbred lambs at the similar age, but more directly into the abattoir here for the maternal. More finished lamb over here. Interestingly, pretty similar ewe weights that people were targeting. Looking at fleece production, pretty similar between, we've got the grey bars all, the green is the maternal one, and the light blue is wool production. On this graph, we pulled out people who valued improvement in diameter highly, and that's where you see the biggest differences in terms of fleece weight, diameter, and fleece returns, getting a higher return fleece out of those people who valued lower fibre diameter more. Over here, this is the percentage of respondents who are shearing wethers and through to beyond their first shearing, and that's much more likely with the fibre diameter people. That's not actually saying how many wethers they're shearing, just that they do it. On the ewe management side, remarkably consistent across all respondents really, and looking at basically managing ewes between 60 to 65 kilos, pretty much according to lifetime ewe guidelines. Culling information on culling is going to be important to the model, so we went back to people to find out more about that. Obviously here is most culling obviously happens leading up to the selection into the flock, and we're looking at combined proportions on visual characteristics and production characteristics, say up to 50%, I guess. But interestingly, in the ewe flocks, probably combined about 10% culling rates across age classes in the breeding ewe flock, and mortality rates over here. Okay, so that's the consultation we've done and pulling all the data together to inform the models. But now we're also actually developing a new model. We've got the current indexes were an older sheep object model, and what we're doing now is making a model which is more fit for purpose because we need to cater for new things. So we need to improve the modelling of the flock structures so that we can look at different management strategies, like what happens to profit when you cull dry sheep or animals sort of fail to rear a lamb, that sort of thing. So we can be a little bit more flexible. We've improved the calculation of feed requirements, and so that we can bring in body condition score and put a value on that, along with going together with looking at reference weights. A key one was to go along with the introduction of the component trait analyses to actually directly value the components instead of net reproduction. So the idea has always been that we want to get a better balance on litter size and lamb survival through ewe rearing ability. In maternal breeds, we've seen that one of the key traits is actually conception rate in ewe lamb matings, and this new model will allow us to look at that directly. And of course, moderating the value of reproduction through the impacts on wool production is an important thing too. People often say that there's too much emphasis on reproduction. So with this new model, we can really get to the bottom of that. Inclusion of some of the easy care functional traits like wrinkle dag, feet and legs, and maybe udders and things like that in the future. And of course, we need to be able to cater for feed efficiency and methane when that comes along. So we're developing this new model, and it's actually a simulation model. What it does, what that actually means is that we generate individual animals according to a flock structure and production system. And what we do is we spin up this flock over a number of joining years, and then we get to a year of evaluation. And once we've done that, because we've got the history of those animals, you can say look up a 6-year-old ewe and see what her complete lifetime history is, and then account for the effects of that history on production in the current year properly. So we spin up the flock, and then in an evaluation year, what we do is we model the events, the environment, and the production physiological status on each day of the year for the current animals. So you can think of it as like we have a data set in the computer of animals that represents the flock and what happens to it every day of the year. So then we calculate profit for the evaluation year, and from that derive the economic value of traits. And so the key thing here is that we're now able to model variability and the impact that has on productivity and sustainability. So just some examples of that. Here we're looking at the contribution of wool to over a lifetime to annual income. So if you think of an individual sheep that makes it right through to 7 years of age, most of its wool's cut as an adult. But profit is annual and it's across the whole flock. So then it becomes a numbers game. You basically have you're shearing a lot more sheep as young ones. So in fact, that most of your wool income in a system like this, more than 50% is coming from young sheep. So it's important to know that kind of information, and that's really determined by reproduction rates, culling, and so on. So that's what's behind that. That's determined by that's an application of the results from the survey. This is another one. If you were mating to terminal size, you have less merino wool produced as young animals because obviously some of your lambs are crossbreds being turned off, and so then the proportion of the contribution of adult wool becomes a little bit more important. And that's pretty much the reflection of the way the economic values between adult and yearling wool in the current indexes for DP and the other indexes actually works. On the reproduction side, we can make different indexes where, say, we put a higher weight on survival or a higher litter size index, and you can see that will generate different outcomes. This is actually a maternal sheep example, but that's what we're aiming for in merinos as well. This is Sam's fancy diagram on how we're going to cost feed requirements. But the simple explanation that I have is that basically what we're going to do is to value body condition is to say, if we could be in better body condition at the time when sheep are doing it hardest at weaning, if that could be a little bit higher, how much feed are we going to save to get them back into mating condition? So that's where the economic value will come for that resilience body condition score trait. Also, if you can improve condition, animals will be less likely to go out of the flock because they're poor doers. Just to finish up, because I had my conclusion slide at the front, I needed a different conclusion slide. So I got this one from my leading breeding talk in 2019, which was selecting sheep for the future. When I saw this the other day, I thought it's still a pretty good summary of what needs to happen. We need to make improvements in all these different trait groupings to improve sustainability. Since leading breeder then, we've got ASBVs for new traits, importantly including the new reproduction analysis and other ones on the way. It's going to be underpinned by genomic predictions, as we've heard from Steve and Peter. We need breeding programs measuring the right traits, crossbreeding in commercial enterprises, and as I've described, the development of the new breeding objectives model applied to merinos this year. We'll have a system set up where we can also, which we can apply to other breeds, maternals and terminals in the coming years. And just to finish off, just thanks to the sheep genetics team, in particular Peter and Emma and a former team member Gus Rose who have done a lot of work behind that survey information, and breeders, producers and others involved in that consultation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Swanee. You've done very well to fit in a huge program of work in a 30-minute time slot. We'll just go through a couple of questions here. The top of the list, how can a breeder be confident that indexes are giving positive economic gains and not just desired gains in breeding values from a subjective standpoint?
Yeah, good question. That's really part of the importance of the consultation process, I think, of going out to people and finding out what traits are important. And then that has to be matched to the model and the genetic potential contained in the genetic parameters about where you can go. If you can be confident that the breeding objective that you've set represents commercial production from a real economic point of view, then we can generally get the indexes to match that, producing gains in the traits appropriately. And that's really what we saw in that MPP index. It has predicted gains for traits which have really been matched in real breeding programs across the whole database. So, the question then is, how good is the MPP index? We need better indexes, obviously. So, that's to come when we see what the new indexes look like and see how people can generate genetic change in those.
Thanks. We might just take one more quick one. But again, Swanee is around for the next 2 days, and we also have Sam Walkham here. So I'd encourage any questions we don't get to, please catch up with those guys. So we'll just finish on, are there plans to update the indexes in other analyses after merinos?
Maybe that was asked before my last slide when I said that the plan is to do the merino indexes first and then move on to maternal indexes next year. The terminal indexes are in a pretty good shape, I think, at the moment, with having been updated for eating quality and lambing ease in the last few years. Do you want me to answer that one too?
Yeah, go for it. So we've got one here from Anthony. Should we be recording condition score at weaning and mating to get an economic value of how much feed is required?
Yeah, good question, Anthony. But not really necessary. Because we've got data collected on condition scores at those different stages, and what we find is that generally after you adjust for the effects of reproduction, you get a good idea of the genetic merit, whatever stage you record it at. So pre-joining is a good time to do it, and that's what we're doing at the moment. It's still a good indicator.
Thanks, Swanee. We might give him another applause, please.